Hello, minions, and welcome to another episode of Designer Discussion. Today, I have my one-on-one with Stan with the exclamation mark. Please make sure you pronounce it. So, welcome to another episode, Stan.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All
Just
right.
hope I can help the ball team.
We should be doing all right. So before we kind of mainly had a focus on everyday heroes. Today I kind of want to dig a little deeper into your history. When we last talked, we talked about your contribution to the original D20 Modern with the Tough Hero, which again, I loved. So I just kind of want to get into what got you started in game design. Where does your origin story begin?
Oh boy, yeah. In the dawn of time. Yeah, I mean, I was not a first generation D&D player. D&D was being I heard of it when it first filtered out into the popular culture. There's this game where people, they make a hero. They predict it's like Lord of the Rings, only you get to be one of the characters, man. So I've been playing games since 1970. I'm playing D&D since 1978, 79.
Okay.
And it was one of my favorite things. And I got lucky enough. I can tell this story the long way, which you don't have time for. So I'm going to just say, through a lucky series of happenstance and right connections and good, good follow up on my part. I want to say it's not who I knew, but what I did. That I was able to get into doing this professionally in the first as a freelancer in the late 80s, early 90s, and then full-time professionally in the mid 90s.
Okay. So I have to ask, when you were freelancing, what was the first system that you started freelancing for?
The first thing I ever did anything for professionally was Torg. Original Torg at West End Games. And my first in-house job was at West End Games.
Torg is still going on.
Torg came back recently. Yeah, no, Torg's back in a big way.
Yeah, I recently had the chance to play. It's a real fun game. So yeah, that's awesome.
My first licensed fiction was a Torg short story. And I did a lot of work on the Star Wars products and it was a master book by the time I joined the company. The Torg system had been kind of pulled out and made its own standalone thing. Master Book. And there were lots of supplements that used that. But yeah, my first stuff as a freelancer was for Torg.
So you say that's that was your first thing as a freelancer. Then you mentioned that you had done something professionally for the first time. And what was your first professional piece of work?
Wow. So I did a lot of fan semi-pro stuff. I did a lot of stuff for villains and vigilantes. That was my big game. Okay. I came in through D&D, but the game that I played the most and was really my game design school was digging in and working on villains and vigilantes with a bunch of other folks. Some of whom wound up working professionally in games, and some of whom tried it and didn't like it, and some of them never did. But we were all there's a lot of monkeying with the game system and learning about taking it apart, seeing why it worked, how we could make it do other things. And some of those things got published here and there. And I'm a cartoonist, so a lot of my early professional stuff were cartoons that I sold. And I'm a author. I'm a fiction writer, so I sold some short stories here and there.
I gotta ask, out of all the different hats that you wear, which one is the most, I want to say, complicated?
Wow. So you know what the answer that you don't want to hear is that it all depends on what you mean by complicated, right? The most complicated is game design, because game design uh, has so many different things involved in it. Um, it's writing, and it's math, and it's social interaction. I mean, it's a complicated thing to do TTRPG game design. Um, it's also the one that I've had the easiest time getting work and doing work in. So the most complicated one for me, and as in trying to make a living at it, is the one that I love the most, which is cartoon. Super hard and very complicated to try and figure out how to make a living as a cartoonist. But yeah, so there's a complicated answer to a simple question.
I know, but I love it. Like I am a huge fan of cartoonists, and so I was kind of curious about if it was gonna be cartoony, just because
I just love it. I just love it.
I grew up with my Calvin and Hobbes, and even I even have a soft spot for Dilbert, even though that's a rough one. But yeah, I just that I did that's pretty cool. That's really cool. Um, so I have to ask, what is the most what was the most difficult system for you to work around? It sounds like your first professional gig, your game to school, the game design
Yeah,
school that
no.
you.
So Torg was a little. Torg was an interesting game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know what? Here's a weird thing. I've spent a lot of my time working on games that have either initially that have somewhere in their very early DNA been done by Bill Slavicsek. Right, Bill was one of the core people working on the Torg game.
Mm-hmm.
Bill was one of the core people doing D20 Modern and the Star Wars RPG. And Bill was my co-designer when I worked on the Pokemon game for 6-year-olds. So I've done a lot of work. It's easy to overlook, but easy to underestimate how much Bill's work has paralleled mine, or how I mean, you can even say how much I'm kind of following a little bit in the way, but I don't like to think of it that way.
It sounds like a dream team. Like we got
Yeah, no,
Hulk
I mean,
Hogan and
yeah,
the Macho Man over
I'm
here.
not sure we always work the best in the same office together, but
So
no,
it's definitely
Bill
Hulk
and I are
Hogan and
very good
Macho Man.
friends. I just saw him a month or so ago when I was back east. No, yes, it would be foolish of me not to say that I would love to work with Bill any chance I get.
I like that. Uh, so you've mentioned quite a few like powerful licenses that you worked on, like
Yeah, I've been
Star Wars to Pokemon. Like that's quite the leap.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I've got to
Marvel
have.
superheroes. I did a bunch of time on Marvel superheroes.
Oh, I
Did
love that game.
I've almost got a chance at Star Trek. Oh, it didn't quite pan out.
Oh,
Yeah, I've worked on a lot of big time licenses.
I which I have to ask. When working with licenses, I mean, you've got to get approval from studios and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
Do you know which one was the most stringent?
Well, there have been some weird ones, like particularly West End games. When I was there, was spending a lot of time licensing properties to do one-off games for Master Ball. And a lot of the companies they signed up with a lot of the properties they signed. They this was in the early to mid 90s, right? They didn't really understand what a role playing game was. So they thought they were thinking something like, you know, a Hasbro board game for kids. And we're writing a 200 to 300 page book full of stuff. The weirdest one was when we licensed that I was working on the team when West End licensed Tank Girl, the movie.
Oh wow.
And we sent the first draft in for review, including art and including, I mean, it's Tank Girl. I don't know if you remember Tank Girl.
I love
but
Tank Girl.
It's a very bizarre thing, and it's got some very subversive stuff in it. And they were a little tight with details about the film, so we did a lot of it pulling the ideas. People who worked on it loved the Tank Girl comic, which is even more subversive. And so we had stuff in there that we sent in for review, and they said, "You've got a girl who's sleeping with a kangaroo. You can't have that." We're like, that's in your movie. What do you mean we can't put it in our game? It's because they're thinking Candyland, and
Right.
we are writing a TTRPG for grown-up people. So those were the weirdest things. Lucasfilm has been weird at times, right? Even before I came on, it was a little. Before I came in, Lucasfilm didn't really have a continuity department writ large. This was before most of the novels even started. This material that West End was developing was expanded world stuff this is before any of the prequel movies, before any of the TV shows, before any of the big novels. All of the novels that were written back then are the ones that they don't want to talk about now. Like it's Splinter of the Mind's Eye stuff.
The legends.
Yeah. So the stuff that West End was developing was canon Star Wars background material for anyone else who was licensing it. And then by the time I came on, Lucasfilm's licensing department was growing and becoming its own arm. And that was no longer exactly the case. Though it was still very often West End would get calls from other companies that had signed a licensing deal with Lucasfilm, and they say, well, we need information. That Lucasfilm would say, call West End Games, do what they say. Wow. But we would get sometimes, as the Lucasfilm licensing department started to grow and develop its own muscles, and really the fact of the matter is they started focusing on it and making decisions on their own.
Right.
But they didn't tell us what they were. So every once in a while we'd run across something where before we would just do it, and now we'd send it in for licensing, and they say, that doesn't happen in Star Wars. We would say, really? It always had before now. And if you wanted to, you could get snippy about it, or you could stop and remember, wait, it's their toy. Let's make a pitch for our point. But if they say this doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And the two weirdest ones were, we sent in a picture of some guy on Tatooine, the character in the adventure. He had his shirt off and he was sweating and he was digging in the sand.
All right.
And he had his shirt off, and he was sweaty, and you could see his nipples because he was shirtless. And their response was, you can't show nipples. And we said, why? I mean, it's not like we've got a sexy thing where we're having nipples showing through a shit. You've got Slave Leia running a bikini, and granted, I understand why you don't want nipples there, but this is just a guy in there who said, well, this is another galaxy far, far away. We don't even know if they have nipples. No nipples. Okay, no nipples.
No nipples in Star Wars. No crack in baseball.
We don't know if there are nipples in Star Wars. And again, I think we probably could have gone and found some picture somewhere that might have done it, but again, it's their toy. The other one was when we had a adventure where, or I think it might have been a piece of fiction for the Star Wars Adventure Journal, where the Rebel starship was about to go to hyperdrive, so it emptied its was disposal unit, like had been mentioned in Empire Strikes Back. Right. We know that before they go to hyperdrive, they empty their disposal units, and that's how the Millennium Falcon got away from them. Right. So we had the rebels do the same thing. Before their big ship went to hyperdrive, they dumped their disposal units, and they got a note back saying, "We like to think that the rebels are more ecologically minded than the Empire. They don't just dump their garbage into space." Okay. I mean, space is a pretty big place, you know.
I mean, the rebels desperately need to get away, but they're thinking green.
And it's 1995. They're thinking ahead of that green thought, but it was just as kind of weird. We were doing our best to tie into what they had done, and they came back with a interior decision that they'd made somehow along the way that we didn't know about. So it became a little bit of a challenge to keep up with them. Yeah. And then as their department developed more and more, it became even stronger and started supplying guidelines to everyone. And so it was no longer our job at all to manage it. And it was very clear that what's true is what they say is true.
Yeah, that's gotta make writing for them. They're very difficult because you're writing with the assumption that what you write is true, and then you have to send it off, and then you find out that there are parts of what you wrote that just aren't.
Some people handle that better than others.
Are there any franchises or any licenses that you wish you had a chance to work on, but you just
Star Trek?
Yeah,
I'd love to work on Star Trek.
Big Trekkie myself.
I'm sure there are others off the top of my head. I'm not thinking of them. I'm very excited for Everyday Heroes. Just the idea of one-off movies and properties, which might not make a great idea on their own to license in the way that West End, because when West End would license something, they would want to do it so they could have a big book and maybe 2 or 3 follow-on books. And there's a lot of stuff that just isn't meaty enough to really warrant that kind of, you need to gather 6 or 7 of them together. Oh, I've made a strong pitch every year I was at West End for them to do a broad license with Hanna-Barbera for their action stuff, for like Johnny Quest and Thundar and the Herculoids and Space Ghost and all the adventure stuff to make one big game out of it. Because again, any of those on their own probably isn't enough to be a game.
Yeah, I'm not
make it, but you'd be stretching it thin. Yeah.
Oh, that would be so cool.
Yeah.
As you mentioned with Everyday Heroes, I almost cried when I saw Highlander. Like, I am such a Highlander fan.
So Highlander's another one I almost worked on.
Really?
At one point. Highlander's been licensed a lot.
We don't have much to show for it.
And there was one time, I don't want to name names, but there was a guy I know who had, I don't know whether he actually got the license nailed down or he was in the last part of negotiating it, but he had gotten the big meta Highlander license together so that he could do all the different Highlander sub licenses, and he was going to do games or products or sublines for all of them. And I was talking to him about being one of the main writers on the team. But then he had some problems, and there were some money problems, and I think another Highlander film was announced, and suddenly the whole thing kind of disappeared.
Once you get those licenses, if you don't move on them, you can lose them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you only have them for a certain period of time, right? When you sign a license like that, it starts from the day you sign it, and usually in the past, again, I don't know what it's like now, but in the past, it's like you had a 5-year or a 2-year window to get something out, and maybe the license had something in it about extending it, or maybe it didn't.
So, I mean, as a game designer, when you're consuming like this media, do you like? Is there a part of you that's just like, this is the mechanic I would build for that? Like, when I watch Highlander,
I don't know a game designer that doesn't do that. Right? How would I make that work in a game? But I know that Star Wars is a really great example. I didn't work a lot on Star Wars, but several people of course, given where I've worked, several people I know did. And, hanging out with them after a new Star Wars movie or TV show or animated thing comes out, and it shows a Jedi doing something cool, you could bet the next day the people that were working on Star Wars would come in going, how the hell are we going to do that? We can't do that. That doesn't work. The rules say this.
I remember watching Phantom Menace, and it's Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon doing that mega force jump, and I'm just like, I didn't know they could do that.
It's because right until that moment they couldn't. Or in the very beginning in Phantom Menace, where Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon did that super run.
Oh yeah,
that was the first one. I was working at the TSR by that, or at Wizards by that point, and I was sitting next to someone who had worked on Star Wars in the past, and when we're watching that, and I'm sitting there 5 minutes into it, I looked at him and go, "Can you do that in your game?" And he just looked at me and said, "Shut up."
Yeah, I have to think about how terribly frustrating it is. It must be to be a game designer that's worked on a license and then watch a movie where they just come up with like brand new abilities.
Yeah. Or I mean, even worse when you're actively working. Like if they hadn't done it before and you no longer are working on the game, you just go, "Sorry, we didn't know that. That wasn't true back then." But like J.D. Weicker, who was one of the main Star Wars guys at Wizards for a while, every time something would show, a Jedi doing something crazy, he'd be like, "Oh crap, how am I going to work? And we've got a new product. It's got to work in there. Someone's going to ask on the boards. I'm going to have to give an update. How does that work?"
You would think that they would have somebody on the film production working with the teams doing the.
No, in fact, you find that with the novels too. Like TSR had that. I don't want to say problem. It's the nature of the different kinds of fiction. Right. You want to do things, and you don't want to be tied. You don't want your novelists to have to know everything about the game. You don't want your novels to have the sound of dice rolling in the background of everything that you're doing. Right? You want to give them the freedom to do what's cool and to write a thing that's cool and to make a TV show and use visual effects that are cool. And very often those things will inspire new things. Sometimes it's just like, that's broken. Like if we give them the power to do that, they'll use it in these 8 other ways. They don't think about the repercussions. They don't. In fact, a lot of times, a TV show is better about this than a movie, but particularly a movie. They don't think about the needs of what's happening in this movie. They don't think about how this is going to apply to the next movie. Let's look at at the J.J. Abrams Star Trek,
Yes.
which I have very strong feelings about that I'm not going to talk about. But
You and me
I'm
both,
sure,
buddy. I can
but you
start
look
with a
at
lens flare and end
how they
somewhere else.
how they solved the Khan episode where Dr. McCoy cured death, right? The logical application of that destroys that universe, right? You look at what they did with their being able to teleport from Earth to the Klingon homeworld with their transwarp teleporters. It ruins the world. It completely changes everything. But they don't think about it in that way. Their focus is to make a movie which is going to make hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
Right. We are writing a game which is going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars at best. Over a period, maybe millions of dollars. But or even the novels, like everyone thinks in their own box.
Right.
Problem is that our box, as a game designer, what you're making is to something that will encompass and join in all the various stuff, so that you people at home, so gamers everywhere, can do it themselves. So we've got to bring everything in and mix it all together. They can do their thing in their little individual bubbles, and then we have to deal with
it. The novelist and the screenplay writer can introduce a concept, have it done once, and then discard it.
Right. Here's the other thing that happens a lot. People don't talk about this. I have had some small interactions with the movie making industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, it's very often not even the script writer will think about those things. The director won't. Mm-hmm. The director, depending on the director, there are directors who, I don't want to cast everyone, paint everyone with this brush, but you wind up with a lot of problems that are that grow out of the fact that the director says, "Hey, cinematographer, can we do this?" Sure. Hey, stunt coordinator, can we do this? Hey, CG person, can we do this? Wouldn't it be cool if we did? And they all agree, yeah, that'd be cool. And so it happens. And then, I've had conversations with the script writers who are like, "You can't do that. Do you know what that means if you do that?" I'm like, no, it looks cool. It's totally in. And in fact, we're going to cut your scene out of it because we need extra time for this. And so that's going on the cutting room floor.
Oh, I can think of a few movies where I'm like, I feel like that happened in that movie.
You are correct. That is exactly what happened. That happens a lot. Again, it's the nature of the media. Each medium is different, and so there are going to be different rules of product. Our bad luck is that we are the medium that brings everything in, and we have to explain it all.
Yeah.
The movie maker never has to explain it. They just have to show it. Yeah. The novel writer has to describe it. The game designer has to explain it.
Yeah, the game designer has to build the world for other people to live in.
Yeah.
Like this, that's and I've thought about that with some properties. Like, we've announced a lot of the properties that we're initially going to be coming out with.
I know too many, and I haven't looked at what we announced, and I don't even talk about that. So you can bring up, it's like,
I'll bring up the safe ones.
Right, please.
Like, for example, we one of the ones that we announced was the Crow, and the world of the Crow in the movies is very focused on that one character.
Right.
But having to build a world where that can happen, is very interesting.
And it's also it's very easy to do a story and say, well, this is a one-off thing. It only happens to this. this special circumstance, and that's why
Right.
it happened. But if you're going to make a game out of it, or gamers want to say, I want to be able to do that too. And so you've got to write rules which now are not special, they're broadly applicable, and they open up all kinds of weird problems.
Yeah,
That
it's
happens? Really? Oh, I don't want to live in that world.
so I love that we're tackling that
Hmm.
with this system. And
It's fun. It also will give you gray hairs, but
I could use a little salt in my beard.
this used to be red.
Uh, I so I'm very curious as to uh what what is the most difficult world that you've had to write for, not because of any kind of studio or licensing shenaniganery, but just because the world itself is
I like shenaniganery. Shenaniganery. Shenaniganery.
shenaniganery is
Phenomena.
my favorite word. Like I mean, I think about writing for the world of Pokemon, and that starts to
Oh,
get very weird, you know. So it's
it
just
does, but the thing is that that game was for 6-year-olds.
true.
So I wasn't writing a world book of Pokemon. It was also when the first season of Pokemon came out. So
Where there were
Pokemon is
only
definitely one of those,
151 Pokemon.
right? That was it. You gotta catch them all. That was all. That was
Now,
it.
I
Um,
don't even know how many there are now. There's
yeah.
too
I
many.
mean, the world of Pokemon uh has expanded so much that it's difficult to make it make sense.
Yeah.
Uh, and and here's the thing: there are some products, some IPs, intellectual properties, for those of you who don't know, that's not important. Right? I think that it's great to love Pokemon. It's great to be an adult that loves Pokemon. And I mean that I love Pokemon. It's great to be an adult that loves Pokemon. But when you try to apply the same kind of logic to the world of Pokemon that you do to I don't know, I mean to any of to a setting that was written to make sense as a whole world. Pokemon is not written to make sense as a whole world. They just keep tacking things they like onto it. And I know people that work there, and I know they. I'm not saying that they just. I'm not saying at all that they don't care or they don't try. It's just that's not. It's not written. It's not created for an adult mind. It's created for a kid's mind.
Yeah.
And so what happens in that world, the logic of how that world fits together, really falls apart when you try to make it make sense in an adult setting, an adult frame of mind.
Because it just naturally was never meant to be there. So it's like
Yeah, and there, I think that uh, I think it's worth sometimes doing that because it reveals hidden problems that you can then use going forward on future Pokemon products. And I feel bad whipping Pokemon for this. This is true for any kid's property, right?
yeah.
You can look at what's been done for it and say, wow, that sounded good in the first book, but now that we've added X, Y, and Z, it's really kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And have we just reinvented slavery, or does this mean that that those people, that group over there that everyone liked before, is actually cannibals, or does this, all kinds of things which you can find that the adult logic leads you to.
Yeah.
You
I
want to
mean,
learn from that and then work on not perpetuating it, but you don't want to be beholden to that retroactively, right?
yeah, there are a lot of challenges in game design like that I
Yeah.
just never really even considered, especially when dealing with pre-existing properties.
Well, I mean, it goes into just the fiction, right? This goes into the fiction in the movies. You find that a lot, where something happened in a movie that we all love from the 80s or the 90s, and now it's on its fourth sequel or third TV show, and you try and make it all make sense together. And if you go back to the 80s, you can pull out some of the stuff that's say, but this is true. It said so in the very first movie. And you're like, yeah, well, we didn't know we were going to have an empire at that point. So it's going to hand wave that.
You know who's the expert at that is Doctor Who, though.
They
have hand waved a whole
There's another
lot.
one I almost got to work on and didn't. I'd like to work on Doctor Who at some point.
That would be. I know that there's a TTRPG of Doctor Who out now. That's pretty cool. So,
yeah. When I was working at TSR and Wizards, and during the end of second edition D&D era, so going back into the late 90s, I was working on to something that's timely now. I was working on the Dragonlance team, and there were a lot of Dragonlance books. There were a lot of Dragonlance novels. There were a lot of Dragonlance novels that weren't written by Weiss and Hickman. And there was a whole. They were putting out, back when I joined TSR. There was basically every month there was a new Dragonlance title that came out, or at least 8 times a year. And a lot of them told stories from the history or invented new stuff that happened out in the peripheries. But there's a lot of canon. There's a lot of stuff that's in print that everyone assumes, all the fans assumed that TSR had it all together and everyone was working together. But it wasn't even true then. The book department was in charge of fiction and the game department was in charge of games. And so we often would have those same problems I was talking about earlier from our own product. The book would come out and something would happen and we go, what the hell is that? You can't do that. And but now you can, so we've got to explain it. And so on the Dragonlance team, that has a particular problem in that over the period of time, there were some novels that played looser with the storyline and the history than others did. Yeah. And there were several that contradicted each other. So we internally had a rule of we do not pick and choose. We don't come out and say that something is right and something is wrong, but we pick what we think is right and we kind of ignore the rest. And if someone comes up with says, hey, what about that? We can say unreliable narrator. We can say that's his opinion. That's that character's opinion. Oh. I wrote a book, the Dragonlance Bestiary. Where I had it was the monster book for the Fifth Age game. When I was working on Dragonlance, it wasn't even D&D. It was another game system called the Saga system, a card-based TRPG. Oh. And so this was our monster book for that game, and I wrote it as a book that was written by one of the characters in the novels, one of the main characters from Dragonlance, who was renowned as a storyteller and a drinker. And I had another character who served as his editor, who is renowned as a stickler for the truth. And so for every monster, most of it would be something by this guy who's a storyteller, who's the ex. It was Karaman Majir. It's his stories about when he met this monster or what he heard about this monster or these other things, and any details I could were drawn from Dragonlance books. Some of them less reliable than the other, and so each entry would also have something from the editor saying, well, I can't find any proof of this, but that's what Karaman says. Or
Oh, that's clever.
or there are conflicting theories. Some people say that, other people say this other thing. This is what we know. And so the whole book was kind of an in-world attempt to smooth out as much as possible in saying, it's a big bad world, and everyone's got their own story.
That that's really clever. And I can see that that's kind of been adopted by some of the modern books in D&D. Now we have like, Volo's Guide to Monsters, which sounds very much like what that was. So that's really cool.
You
That's
know what? The the people should respect me more side of me pulls out things like that. Like lots of people I know have told me, who are in the industry, who are working at Wizards now, who are, have said to me how much they like that book, or have told me how it influenced X, Y, or Z. And that makes me feel great. And I'm not saying that I deserve any more credit than that. Right? That's all. That's what we all do. But it's every once in a while when I when I sit down and I think, no one remembers the guy with the exclamation point.
oh,
There's still, I know that there's still, that it's the work I did had these repercussions that are carrying on. That this book has gotten cited a number of times as being a big influence, and a lot of people have told me how much they liked it. And now it sounds like I'm talking about how awesome I am. It's still, however, I mean, I'm super proud of that book. I love that book. And I think that what people have done with it and taken that and gone beyond with it, right? I can't take any credit for going beyond, right? When they pick up the ball and carry it, that's them.
I mean, just from what you've told me about this, is I can see that idea it has grown, in the sense that now, and this has kind of been one of the things that I don't necessarily love that DA is doing, but they are very much establishing their own lore and kind of doubling down on that. So like, there's Volo's Guide to Monsters, and in the new video game, you can actually see Volo, you know, learning
Right.
about these monsters. So it's very much a continuation of that idea that you had, which I
Volo
mean,
himself is a weird version of that, because initially, the character of Volo coming out of second edition, he was a completely unreliable narrator. He was totally just tell a big good a story that'll get people so entranced that they'll buy you drinks and give you somewhere to stay for free. He was a total con man. He wasn't. He did stuff, but he was a total face. Like, he would tell whatever story pleased the crowd, he'd tell that story. And that's the old Volo's guides from second edition were, him telling you where to find the cheapest place to stay, or the bar with the best serving wenches. Like, Volo himself has gotten a huge facelift to who he is today, which is true. Well, the modern one is true, because that's what today's audience seems. And I don't know anyone, even the people who created Volo originally, who don't agree with that. There are fans that don't agree with that. Fans who love the old material and want it to remain true are the ones who will get bent out of shape over adjustments. By and large, all the game designers I know, there are exceptions. By and large, the game designers I know who worked on the older stuff are happy to be remembered. Right? If you will say in the book somewhere, inspired by the work of so and so, someone says, inspired, one of the inspirations of this was this thing that Stan wrote for D&D for Dragonlance 5th edition, blah blah blah. Whatever. That's what we want. But another thing, what's coming up today, right, or this week, with the Wizards announcing that they're going to do a Spelljammer.
Oh yeah, Spelljammer. Like
Right?
that's the big
Right.
thing.
Jeff Grubb's one of our consultants here, and he's a friend of mine, and we talk about it. There are a bunch of people who are bent out of shape about, oh, they're changing Jeff's original vision. I had lunch with Jeff the other day. It's like, vision. We had to make something, so I wrote that. This seems cool. You know what? The fact that they remembered it, I wish. You know what I want? I want them to say thank you, Jeff, louder. That's what I want. He didn't say that, but that's what it boils. He wants to be remembered, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Jeff did a great stuff, and we're going to carry it forward. That's what you want. You want, in the end, that's all you're ever going to have, right? If what you did is good enough that people like it, they will carry it forward and make it their own.
I mean, I think it says something that people are bent out of shape about it.
Yeah.
I mean, as I don't know about Jeff, but I would feel very like honored, like the fact that gets announced and people are like, but what about what he
except
did?
that we don't want people. I mean, that's a mixed blessing.
Mm-hmm.
We want people to just have fun. You know what? The old stuff is not going anywhere.
True.
All you're talking about is what is the new stuff going to be, and then you get back to that thing we were talking about before. Of, well, I guess in an earlier interview about, if you want to make it so that what you like is what everyone else has to do, that's not cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I do have to ask. I mean, there's clearly a hunger for more of what you and the original squad made. Like, there is a hunger for Dragonlance. There is a hunger for
I mean, Dragonlance is a super good example because I wasn't the original group. I was a second or third group, and we had the same thing. Some of what we wrote, people didn't like, and some of it they've kept, and some of it they've thrown out. Like, I'm not okay. It's just a small story.
Bring it on.
But when we started working on it, Weiss and Hickman were TSR and Weiss and Hickman were having a fight,
right?
And they weren't involved. And then when Wizards bought the company, one of the things they did was specifically say, we're going to make amends with Weiss and Hickman and bring them back in. And so we were actively doing Dragonlance stuff, and Weiss and Hickman came in to advise. And there were things we were doing that they didn't like. So we all got together. I don't know, because of the early social media, it was kind of built up as very confrontational. Right. So we had a summit. We had a Dragonlance summit where we all got together, and Weiss and Hickman came in and they said, well, okay, we don't want to do this. We do want to do this, and we don't want to do this, and we don't want to do this. And some of the things they had been misinformed on, and some of the things they hadn't been. But in the end, we were told that we were given an organizational structure, right? They were going to get to have the vision for Dragonlance because they had the original vision for Dragonlance. And so we took what we had been doing and said, all right, this is part of playing on a team. Right before, we were the captain. We got told we're not the captain anymore. But again, I would make that movies versus books versus games, right? Weiss and Hickman and they're going to write novels. Those are going to be New York Times bestsellers. And so guess who gets to run the team? The people that are going to write the New York Times bestsellers and have the vision for the world and were the original creators for it. Right. I don't know anyone on our team who had a problem with that. I know that we were certainly sad to have lost the ability to control it, but no one had a problem with it. And so we got together and figured out what it was. And some of what we had planned, we threw out. And some of what we had planned, they liked, and they took it and carried it forward. Not the way we would have. But that's the game. Yeah. The game. That's the game of publishing.
I, as you describe this, I'm just seeing like pages and pages and pages of documents having to be rewritten, and that's like my nightmare.
I have a folder full of stuff. I have a banker's box full of stuff, and it includes a bunch of stuff that we had written or that we had planned that never happened. Oh, here's another. So because this was such a big thing, this Dragonland Summit, we got together and made the way we have political summits, everyone will get together and sign a document. We prepared a document basically saying, you know what, we've been in our separate worlds before, but now we're all working together. We all love Dragonlance, and we want to work together to make it great for the world, and we're happy to be together. And we all signed it. We all signed this original document and then made copies and posted it. It was a big news on the D&D website for a while. I have the original Dragonlance Summit piece of paper that everyone signed.
There's some Dragonlance collector out there listening and watching this.
I know three of them who've offered me money for it.
I was just about to say, there's got to be somebody out there that's just like, that's the one thing I don't have.
You know what? Maybe one of those people who are putting together D&D museums will offer me enough money that I'll consider selling.
Yeah, when you were mentioning the shoebox full of like the unwritten Dragonlance stuff, I'm just like, oh yeah, somebody's gonna want that. Somebody's gonna want that bad.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure. Let's stop, but we're going to turn this into a Dragonlance.
Oh no, I was just about to wrap us up with my final question here, which is like I mean, you've had a storied game designer career, and I have to ask, if you could give a piece of advice to up and coming game designers, what would it be?
The advice I give most often is to remember that the point of all of this is for the game to be fun.
Yeah.
It's very easy. Almost every game designer will have a handful of stories about time that they've spent working on something and building something, and it comes together and it works mathematically, and then they sit down and they hand it to people and they just don't like it. It's not fun. In the end, these are games, and the fun leads.
Yeah.
So secondary thing, I don't know if I want. So this only applies if you're working for a company.
Okay.
Is the company is paying you to create something. They're not paying you to publish exactly what you wrote. Right? You're working with a team. You're going to submit your thing. Someone's going to tweak it or change it or have an idea, and it's going to not be what you wrote.
Oh,
that's the way it goes. Right? They're going to take it, and they may never publish it. That's the biggest problem people I know I used to work with have, where they'd work on something, and then they go, yeah, we're not going to use this. And I mean, that makes you mad. But in the end, and some of them would argue, what do you think you're paying me for? And the answer is that you got paid. Yeah. No one can take away the checks and the insurance that you got as a member of, or I mean, even worse as a freelancer though, right? They're paying you to create material. There's no promise that your vision is going to be carried forward, right? Depending on what rights you sign away, like everything is different. But in most cases, and particularly a work for hire case or a work on staff case, they're paying you to make a thing, to create material, but it's still raw material until it comes out until it goes through the process. And so Oh, there's a lot. Now, on the other side of that is the companies could have gotten better, but still could get a lot more better, better at working with the writers and letting them know we're going to change this. We're giving them an opportunity to change it themselves or whatever. But there's no promise of that. Right? When you write something, when you're getting paid to write something for someone, work for hire or on staff, you are writing it and it then becomes theirs and they can do what they want with it. And if you're not okay with that, then this is not the gig for you. You want to have control over what you want your vision to be carried through, then you want to be the publisher.
Yeah.
Now, I like our team is great. Like we talk through everything. Our publisher has a vision. Our designers have their own visions. We talk through them and we find the middle ground. I think everyone knows that if push comes to shove, the higher you are up on the org chart, you get to make the final call. But a smaller team, it's easier, right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows, everyone talks. The bigger the team is, or the more you're an outsider being called in, the more you need to remember that you're being called in to do a thing and provide a service. And then you just need to be okay with it in your heart. You need to not badmouth people. See too many freelancers because what they wrote got thrown, changed or thrown out, that they badmouth the company they've been working for. All that does is keep them from getting further work.
And that, I think that leads beautifully into my last question that I have for you.
Oh,
here.
good, because that was a really negative thing. Let's end positive. I don't want to be negative.
I think this will lead us to that positive ending that we're looking for, which is, how do you learn to handle feedback? Because I've seen this team handle it with extraordinary grace.
Yeah.
And I have seen people crumbled by feedback. So like,
It's hard.
how have you learned to do that?
Well, I mean, the first part of that answer is it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, no one likes being told bad things about what they've done, particularly if they happen to think that it's good. I think it's it's a mindset, right? It's getting yourself in the right space and understanding that that nothing you write is going to be loved by everyone. And sometimes the answer is, you know what, person who's yelling at me, this just isn't for you. And I don't mean that in a dismissive way. It's like it has a goal that does this, and you don't like that goal. Sorry, we're not going to change it to this is what it is. The second part is that sometimes that's you. Sometimes like, oh, but I want this, but that's not what it is. Sorry, man. And that's why we don't like it.
Yeah. That man, that takes.
But that doesn't change how good it is for what you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
It's hard in any creative industry in particular, but even in non-creative industries, it's hard to have your work reviewed and something does what you wanted it to is called bad or is judged badly. I know that I do it, but I don't know how. Right? Sometimes you get used to it. I find it very easy at times. If someone doesn't like something of mine, I don't read it. I've gotten very good at most of the time not taking it as what I did was bad. I take it as they wanted something different. Right. And then I can stop and think, okay, is that a fair assessment? Or does what they want just different than what we made? And particularly when that second part is true, which is true a lot, then I have no problem going, not my problem, man. I can try and be gentle with you to explain it, but in the end, you wanted something which is different than what the company wanted to make, or I, the creator, want. My goal was this. It was never going to be that.
That takes an extraordinary amount of strength of
It's
character.
it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. I'm not saying so just do that. But it's it's a Zen kind of thing. It's a if I were to look at it, I would say that this is part of my life's Zen journey. I've learned to walk that path. Different people have different ways of doing it, right? But finding your way to make peace with that. Grasshopper, that is all.
That is our lesson for today.
It is as simple and as difficult as that.
I gotta tell you, the first time I wrote something that got feedback, I almost went into a tailspin. So like it has been a true honor watching you all get to work. And yeah, I think that's a great ending point for us here today. We really kind of went through the gamut, and thank you for taking the time. Uh
This is the problem of talking with me is I like to talk and I got a lot of stories.
I love these stories, and I know for certain that our minions here are gonna love these stories too, because they're already talking about this stuff on all the socials and asking me to ask these questions. So, um,
All right, well, you get some more questions, bring me back, and I'll tell some more stories.
heck yeah, and that's the game plan. And if you have a question that you would like for me to ask Stan, put it in the comments below. But that's gonna be us for today. So thank you for watching. Please back our Kickstarter. And bye.
Bye.